Hi there, everybody. I'm Karen Sorensen, and I'm your host for Caught Between Worlds, Navigating End-of-Life Experiences. And today we have a very special guest. We have Catherine Hand, who is a clinical hypnotherapist, and she's from Australia, and she's associated with the Newton Institute. And so I want to welcome Catherine, and I'm so excited to hear her all about hypnotherapy and how that might help when one is transitioning or, yeah, go right ahead.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really excited to be here today and share with your audience some of the information that I've been very privileged to be able to learn and discover myself since I've become a hypnotherapist, and in particular since I've become involved with the work of Michael Newton. So it's fascinating, and it's just so humbling actually to be able to work at this level with people and help them really live a very full potential of their life and a soul-centered, heart-driven life. So yeah, thank you for having me today.
My pleasure, our pleasure. Start us off, just maybe talk to us a little bit about what hypnotherapy is.
Well, there's a lot of misconceptions about hypnotherapy, and a lot of people feel that they're going to lose control of their mind, and it's not like that at all. Our body goes into a natural state of hypnosis many, many times a day. You've probably all experienced when you're driving along a freeway that you know very well, and all of a sudden you sort of get to a landmark and you say, you know, wow, how did I get here? And you've just been in a natural state of hypnosis. It's a relaxed state. You're still functioning, you're still alert, but you're able to bypass the critical factor of your conscious mind. And in a clinical setting, we can utilize that to our advantage, and we can use some positive suggestion and some guidance to help take you into a state or a place or a new way of being that's much more beneficial. So it's a very relaxed, beautiful place to be. Just like when you're lying in bed on a Sunday morning and you sort of, if the phone rang, you could hear it and you could get up and answer it, but you really can't be bothered. You just want to lie there in that lovely, dreamy place.
That's nice. That sounds really nice.
Yeah, it is.
So do you have a big couch? Because, you know, when I watch hypnotherapists on TV, you know, they always have this big couch.
I have a beautiful black magical hypno chair that just reclines right back, and I put blankets on people and they hold a pillow on their tummy and get very comfy. And look, you know, with hypnosis, you can't, you know, get stuck in hypnosis, which is a common fear that people have. It would be like being stuck in a daydream. When you're sitting on a bus, you might be looking out the window, daydreaming. You know, you can't get stuck in a daydream. You can't get stuck in hypnosis. It's very relaxing, and it's a really receptive place to be in, so that you can, you know, in a lot of my work, I take people back into their past lives, or I take people into a life between life state. And so it's very easy to do when you're nice and relaxed and receptive to that kind of thing.
Catherine, your voice is getting very, very, like I can hardly hear you. Can you turn your
Is that a little bit better?
Okay, or just speak up a little bit more, maybe. Okay. Yeah, I know these technical difficulties, but please bear with us, folks. I know, I said, my first introduction to hypnotherapy in the hospice setting was, we had a hypnotherapist on staff, and she would do her rounds in the inpatient care center, and they would also call her to help draw blood, because she could relax patients so that the blood veins, you know, would be easier to access. So I know that there's a lot of cool reasons why to have hypnotherapy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I used it myself in preparing for childbirth, and Yeah. So, and you know, one of the things that I really wanted to do is have a beautiful, easy childbirth, and the midwife came up to me after I had delivered, when I was back in the maternity ward, and she said, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years and I never come and visit mums in the maternity ward. But she
Mhm.
said, you just had the most textbook perfect delivery. And so I thought, well, there you go. It was all my hypno birthing. I'm sure
Yeah.
that prepared for that. So yeah, in the medical realm, it's fantastic. It's got so many uses in a more clinical setting, anything from nail biting to, uh, you know, very deep phobias, to having, you know, teeth removed, all sorts of things. It can be, you know, you can use it for anything.
Yeah.
It can
Well,
never hurt. Yeah.
the last book that I listened to on Audible was Journey of Souls by Dr. Newton. And, you know, I mean, when we first met, you made me cry because it was just so
Oh.
beautiful. So let's catch everybody up on Dr. Newton and the Newton Institute too, please.
Yeah, well, for those that don't know, Dr. Michael Newton, he was a pioneer. We lost him a couple of years ago, 2016. He passed on after a very long and full career. And he was a very conservative psychologist who had no real belief in the afterlife or anything like that. He was very conservative, very traditional, mainstream. And he had a client who came to see him, and she was suffering from very, very severe loneliness. And so when he prompted her to go back to the source of that loneliness, as is often the case when you're doing regression healing, regression therapy, she started talking about how she wasn't with her soul group, and all her soul group were still in the spirit realm, and she'd come into this incarnation on her own. And he was just bewildered. He couldn't really work out what she was talking about. And the more he quizzed her, he started to understand that she was in her soul life, in her life between life state. And she was, you know, what she gained from that session was that she had actually chosen to come into this incarnation on her own, without her soul group, to learn to deal with all the challenges of living a human life without the physical support of people from her soul realm. So it was very beneficial and very healing for her to realize that she had chosen that, she'd set it up. And what it did for Dr. Newton was, you know, launch him into a new phase of his career. And he started to get more and more patients coming to him that he could then take back into their soul state. And he started to, he coined the phrase, the life between life state. It was that period of time where we're back in our immortal home before we go on to another lifetime. So it was mind-blowing work for him. He was not prepared for it. And of course it was his life mission. And he went on to he actually databased about 7,000 case studies. And he wrote, he picked the best of them, and he published them in his first book, which was launched as Journey of Souls. And in fact, there was so much information that he'd put in that book. Some of it the publishers at the time thought was a little bit out there just yet, because it was early 90s. I think it was finally published in 94. And when you think about how far we've come since then, and what we now know, but back then it was groundbreaking. We'd never seen such a well documented look at the afterlife and what exactly goes on in our immortal home. So it was groundbreaking work. His second book then, or the remainder, the balance of the work that they thought was a bit too woo-woo, they actually held on and published in his second book. So yeah.
And that's Destiny of Souls, right?
That was Destiny of Souls. And then, of course, as he began to get older and he sort of stepped out of clinic, he then started an institute, and that institute still runs today. There's about 250 of us are trained in his method. So it's incredibly beautiful work to do, and knowing that we've learnt his techniques, we've got the best of all of his 40 years of experience, and we can now take people and do the same work that he did. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, tell us, I mean, we're all sitting here waiting with bated breath. Tell us a couple of your maybe, studies or something, or people that you have worked with. Just, you remember those.
Yeah. Well, what I'll do, just to help people understand a little bit about the process, when we take a client back through through a life between life session, we take them back through their childhood fairly rapidly, and it just helps to deepen them, and it helps them to learn how they recall information, because we're taking them right down into their subconscious, deep into their subconscious, so they can access information from the Akashic records or from the field, whatever you like to call it. And we're going right down deep. So we want to take them back through their early childhood. A lot of them remember very early memories of when they were 1 or 2 years old. And often if they've lost a parent, to go back and remember a time when they were being held by their mum or being bounced on their dad's knee, it's really beautiful for them, because they really connect to that as if it's happening right now. And then we take them back into the womb, which again is as equally as profound, because they learn a lot of secrets, or they discover that their mother had anxiety, and that could contribute to their current anxiety. I've had all sorts of family secrets get blown out of the closet when they go back into the womb. And so it's really interesting. And they've got a foot in both worlds. When we're in the womb, we're still connected to our higher self. We're still connected to the soul realm. And yet we're in a human body. We're starting to adapt to having a human body and human belief systems and all that sort of thing. So it's a very interesting place to be. Mm-hmm. Then from that womb state, we take people back into their past life, into their most recent past life most of the time. Sometimes they go into another past life from any other time period. And then through that past life, we take them through their final breath, their moment of death, where they then travel out from the earth plane and they go into their immortal home. Once they get to their immortal home, they reunite with their soul family, which is amazing. And usually that's at the moment where they just dissolve into tears, because the love that you feel and you experience when you're reunited with your soul family is incredible. We don't experience love like it while we're on earth. So they get met and welcomed with that sense of camaraderie, like a returning soldier, coming back from battle. And then they meet, they typically will go and meet in front of the Council of Elders, and the elders will give them a review of what happened and how they performed. And it's quite, it's quite sobering for them, but non-judgmental, very, very loving. And then they'll learn a lot about what they do in the soul world. And this is where they often learn a lot about the gifts that they have as a human. What gifts do they bring with them? They might find that they're an animal carer, or they work in the nursery with young souls. They might discover that they're a shaman, or that they're, they work with plants and nature, or that they work with as a healer, or as a conduit, a medium, that sort of thing. So people will find out a lot more about who they are and why they have certain gifts that they bring into their incarnations with them. So that's the process. It's a beautiful process, and often by the end of it, they do not want to come back here. My job is to go, okay, come back. We've got to come back and do some more in this lifetime, because they're so high. The vibration is literally so high that they love it, and they just don't want to come back. So Yeah, it's beautiful work. It's very intimate, obviously, because I'm taking people back there. I'm taking them back into a past life where they're learning. They might be learning about some of the struggles or the challenges or the blocks that they had in that lifetime, and they can see the parallels often between that lifetime and this lifetime. So it's a huge learning for them to say, okay, I got really stuck in that lifetime with being too violent and aggressive. And in fact, one of my clients, he that exact same thing happened. I took him back. He realized that he'd had in the lifetime that he went into, he was just a young girl. He was a 14-year-old girl in Europe. It was in a time where they had to go and collect water from a spring in a bucket. She went down to the spring with her bucket, as she did every morning, and this particular morning she was met with a whole group of marauders, was the word that he used, that came through the village and just destroyed the village. They were just bringing death and destruction, razing the huts to the ground. She was actually brutally attacked and raped by about 4 men. And so she went through a very traumatic death. But as is often the case, our soul will actually protect us from that trauma. So the most traumatic of deaths are not painful to us. And we often sort of leave our body just in that final moment. So death is always a beautiful moment. There's no fear. There's can be a little bit of sadness about leaving our loved ones. But normally people are just like, wow, this is beautiful. And the moment of death and dying is far more it's easier to go through. The transition from human form to death is much easier than being born.
Oh, wow.
Birth is much more traumatic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I never thought about like that before.
Yeah. So because when you think about it, we've come from this all-loving, all-knowing realm of consciousness where we're everything. We're unconditional love. We've got amazing wisdom. We have an understanding that we're connected to all that is, and so then we have to come and squeeze ourselves into this little human form, and Earth is a really hard gig. So we have a lot of challenges. So there's a lot of anxiety often in a soul about coming into this world and going through it all again. So the moment of death is a beautiful release. It's just like, I'm going home into this amazing place, and we go through a natural cleansing and healing as we actually leave the earth plane, and we're just magnetically drawn to our soul home. And often if we're a younger soul, we'll be met by our guides or our loved ones, and we're escorted back home so that you're not left bewildered. And I think it's like, I often feel that it's similar to when the very first time you go overseas and your whole family comes and sees you off at the airport. I remember when I was 20 or 21, and I went, I left Sydney, and I was going to Europe for my first time. And the whole family was at the airport waving me off. And by the time I'd done all my traveling in my late 20s, and I'd been to London about 4 or 5 times, you get yourself to the airport and you jump in a cab and you get on the plane. And it's the same sort of thing. The more seasoned soul will leave the body and sort of get itself home, but of course you then met by your soul family, and you go through that beautiful process of homecoming. So so I took him back through his lifetime. He had that very traumatic lifetime where he was a young girl. He was brutally attacked and murdered, and when he left his body, he went within himself and did an amazing healing where he saw all these images and visuals, and he saw that he'd had about 12 or 15 lifetimes where he'd been attacked, or there'd been a sense of injustice, quite horrible injustice. And he realized that in this lifetime, that was something that he was constantly affected and impacted by, the sense of injustice, whether it was for himself or for other people. And yeah, and he realized that in his other lifetimes, he'd often dealt with it by being equally as violent. You know, he'd had a lot of lifetimes as a soldier where he was quite brutal, or he was attacking, and he was always on the defensive. And he saw a beautiful image of like a pen or a quill, and he realized that words and the ability to communicate were actually far more powerful and effective than using any type of violence to help people. And in this lifetime, he now does. He helps people using the legal methods and composing letters and that sort of thing to be able to help them fight their battles rather than becoming sort of violent and aggressive and all of that sort of thing. And he also realized he was a channeler. And so after that session, he's now started channeling, and he's just opening up all the time, and he's now met his twin flame. So it's taken about 2 years for him to really, you know, sort of step into owning who he really is. But that process all began with just this understanding of who he is on a soul level.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what, I don't know if everybody knows what channeling means or what twin flame means. Can you just touch on that a little bit? Those are kind of new out here.
Yeah. Well, channeling is when you're just using your voice box as a tool to help other higher beings speak through you. And so there's different ways that you can do it. But you know, some trance channelers will go into a deep trance state, and they sort of almost go to sleep and just take themselves right out, and then another being will just come through and speak. But a lot of the time channeling occurs just when you're getting some really higher wisdom or higher guidance just come through you. And we all do it at times, in fact. You know, sometimes someone might ask you for advice and you start speaking, and this amazing wisdom and advice comes out, and then you think, wow, you know, I didn't know I was so wise. And that's often our natural higher self coming through. It's our wisdom. But people can do it using the collective consciousness of a group of higher beings, or they can channel one being through. So it's very interesting. You know, it's something that I think we can all do it. We all have the capacity to do it. Like, we're all naturally intuitive, but some people have a gift for it where they can just knock themselves out of the way and let some other being come through and speak through them. So it's amazing work. And a lot of people, you know, you've probably heard of Abraham Hicks. A lot of your audience might have heard of Abraham Hicks. And it's the same, you know, she's bringing through the wisdom of this collective group of higher beings that they call themselves Abraham. And Esther Hicks is actually the channel that brings that wisdom through. So he's now doing that. I've had, and as for twin flames, now twin flames is an interesting one because a lot of people have a belief that when you, as a soul, we split in half, and we're always on the search for that other half, and that when you meet that other half, it's just amazing. You feel complete and full. Interestingly, Dr. Newton, in all the 7,000 case studies that he worked with, he never had any soul talk in those terms. He certainly had a lot of people that talked about their primary soulmate, the one soulmate that they particularly love incarnating with. It seems to be that particular soul is a very close, has a very close bond. And so he preferred to use the term primary soulmate rather than twin flame. But for a lot of people, the term is interchangeable. And I think that the primary, the key thing about a twin flame or a primary soulmate is that when you do have that person incarnate with you, because we don't always incarnate with our primary soulmate or your twin flame, but when we do, we often come together in a very profound way and do this similar sort of work that is helping humanity, helping the planet. And so this is exactly what's happening with this client Tim, that has had to work through a lot of his stuff with injustice and helping the underdog and helping those that have been really badly done by. And he's met his soulmate, his primary soulmate, twin flame, whatever you want to call it, and they're now doing beautiful healing work together. And in fact, he met her at a conference that we run called the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, and we hold it at Uluru, which is all about your own personal power and healing any blocks that you have to, really step into your own power and own your own power. They actually met at our conference, which we love, of course. And so they're sort of just going ahead now doing their work as soulmates and bringing incredible healing to people through the healing workshops that they do. And they're combining their skills and doing that wonderfully. So yeah, it is amazing when I see another client that I had. She came to see me on New Year's Day. She said, I've got to see you. I have to start the year off with a Life Between Life session. And so she came along, she had a session. We established that she was quite an advanced soul. Her group did work with helping to maintain and correct portals and gateways, universal portals and gateways, which was quite interesting to hear about. And she also realized that she was a medium through doing the session, and she'd never wanted to own that before. She'd always been too scared to say that she was a medium, but she'd always had a sense of other spirits around her and were communicating, but she just wasn't brave enough to put it out there and actually say that that's what she did. And she hadn't really told anyone about this gift that she had. And so after she left the session, she started to just practice, really saying that I'm a medium and this is what I do. And in the coming days and weeks, she actually got some business cards printed up. And as often is the case, once you step into this work and you follow the synchronicities, everything just opens up for you and opportunities present themselves. And she met a guy that I think she'd been to school with him, but she knew him from a long time ago. And, they bumped into each other in the street, perfectly aligned. And he said, what are you doing now? And she said, oh, well, I'm working I'm a medium. And I've just started up my own practice. And he said, wow, as it turned out, he was a producer, or he was involved in working with a show that was just starting up in Australia called The One. And they were looking for Australia's best mediums. And he said, come and audition. And she actually got through, I think, about the first 4 rounds before she got knocked out. But as someone who had a few weeks ago, not even been able to say out in public or say out loud that she was a medium, there she was sitting there on a show going through all these tests that they were doing. So yeah, it just goes to show that when you really step into who you are, the universe will align itself for you to help you, achieve what you came here to do and to be here doing your mission and serving your purpose. So, yeah.
I'm sitting here wondering, and maybe other people are, how long is a life between a life?
Well, that's interesting. There's no easy answer for that. There was another doctor called Ian Stevenson, and Ian Stevenson, like Dr. Newton, came from a very scientific mind, and he was working with children primarily, because children can have the ability to have a spontaneous past life recall. And he was working with cultures where they believe in reincarnation. It's not something that is hidden or taboo. And so he was working in places like India, Burma, Turkey, and he worked with about 3,500 cases where children were recalling their past lives, and they were often going back to their past life families, and they would remember where they lived, and they would remember how they died. They'd remember, they'd be saying to their parents, "You're not my real mummy and daddy. I want my mummy," you know. And so with the work that he did, that's still been continued today, a guy called Dr. Tucker, Jim Tucker, he's working at a university in Virginia in a department called the Department of Perceptual Studies, and they have now gone and meticulously databased all the information that Dr. Stevenson collected. And what they found interesting is that on average, it works out that there's about a 2.5, in human years, there's about 2.5 years in between incarnations. So it's not long at all. Yeah. So, you know, I think we think that hundreds of years could go by before we come back. Maybe it was the case that used to be a longer gap, but his work found that it was on average about 2.5 years. So this is why we often reincarnate back into our same family. And, you know, you might have been your grandmother, and now you come back and you know, you're the baby again. So it very interesting.
That is very interesting.
But of course, you know, when you think of it, our human years it's a human construct anyway. So I you know, I think that helps us to understand from a human point of view. But I think when you're in the spirit realm, there is no sense of time anyway. So
yeah, it's interesting. I just recently lost my mother last month, and so when I see babies now, I'm like, "Mom, is that you?" So the other question I have is, if someone has a near-death experience, right? Could that soul go on and then another soul take that body? Or, I mean, is there any studies on that? What's going on with that?
well, you hear of it. I mean, I've heard of it happening a lot. I have a speaker. In fact, we have 2 speakers at our upcoming conference that are both what they call walk-ins, where that exact same thing has happened. The soul has decided to depart the body, and another soul has inhabited that, just like a vehicle, you know, just like one driver getting out of the car and another driver getting in. You know, I don't know if there's been any studies about it. It's something that I feel that is only more recently even being talked about. Again, it was something that a lot of people didn't feel all that comfortable about sharing with people, but increasingly more, I'm hearing it more and more. You know, there's a Dr. PMH Atwater has done a lot of study into near-death experience. She may have some data on walk-ins, but I'm not sure. I don't know of any big study that's been done on it. It would be interesting to find out. Yeah.
Well, now I have a word for it. Walk-ins. Okay.
Yeah.
And then another question I've had, after you've had hypnotherapy and you've gone through all the regression and everything, does it change how you feel about life? And I mean, or do we just forget what we just, you know, I've never had hypnotherapy. So I'm wondering, how do I feel when I'm done with it, I guess, after I've had a session with you?
Yeah, it's life-changing. I mean, you literally are a different person. Typically, these are the typical ways that somebody's life will change after they've done this kind of work, because it's very profound, very, very deeply personal, very healing work on many, many levels. So typically the most common thing that people notice afterwards is that they're more in touch with their higher self. They feel more connected to their soul, to the truth of who they really are. They have lost the fear of death, because I take all of my clients through their death moment. And to this date, no one has ever had a traumatic death, ever. So they realize that death is nothing to fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they typically have connected in, like I said, with Tim and with Melanie, the two clients that I talked about. They've connected in with some of their gifts, their natural soul gifts, and they start to open that up, and it comes into their life, and it becomes easier for them to use and to work with. So their life will quite often very drastically change, because they might, you know, for Melanie, she went from, you know, I can't remember what she was doing. It might be an office worker or something, to all of a sudden being able to see clients and say, I'm a medium, and, you know, come and see me. I can bring grandma through. I can bring your mum through. And so when you're doing something that you're helping humanity, you're helping people heal, and you're being the best version of yourself, you know, your life dramatically changes. You're doing something that you love, that you came here, because we all had our mission prior to coming, but part of the contract is that we have that veil of forgetting, and so we have to relearn all over again, and that is part of our challenge, to wake up and go, who am I? And, you know, when we talk about going to the Council of Elders, the Council of Elders don't judge us. They don't make us feel bad. They just want to know, how did we go when we met challenges? Did we pick ourselves up and keep going? Were we strong? Did we become submerged by our host body? Did we succumb to the dogmas and the beliefs, the limiting beliefs of our culture, for example? Because that can be a massive challenge. If you've been born into maybe a fundamentalist religion, and it's very limiting, and it's not helping your growth as a person, or it's not helping humanity, you know, were you submerged by those beliefs, or were you strong enough to stand up to that cultural belief and say, this is wrong? And just because we've done it for the last 400 years or 600 years or 2,000 years, it doesn't mean it's right. So these are the things that we're always being challenged by. Did we own who we are as a soul, and bring our gifts to the world and to humanity, and to the healing of the planet in general? Or did we just sort of give in to our host body and get submerged by that? So when you step into yourself and you see what your gifts are, and you go out into the world and you start to flow with the synchronicity of life, it's life changing. And then the other thing that commonly happens is that people can't ever feel like they're a victim. That any victim mentality just dissipates, because they realize that I set it up before I came here, and everything that's occurring, I have the power of choice. You know, I can change it. I can guide it. You know, I chose these terrible, abusive, alcoholic parents for a reason. I had to learn something from it. Or I chose to, you know, live in a body that has a severe disability for a reason, because I had to learn something from it. So yeah, it's very deep, life-changing work.
That's fascinating. Gosh,
Yeah.
Catherine, thank you so much for being here and helping us learn about all of Dr. Newton's work and your work. And I'm going to definitely stay in touch with you, because I want to learn some more about all of this. And, you know, it's just great. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
Is there any parting comments that you may have? Tell us a little bit more about when the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, right? That's how I said it. Where is it? And when is it coming up again? And how can we find you so that we can follow you too?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. My website is catherinehand.com.au. The Cosmic Consciousness Conference is amazing. Obviously, it's an extension of all the work that I do, and I run that with my partner. We've both had near-death experiences, which, you know, is what has taken us on this journey. And so we, you know, Uluru, for those who don't know, Uluru is one of the most sacred sites on the planet. It's deep in the centre of Australia. It's a huge, big monolith that is like an iceberg. It's so big that what you see above ground is only a little percentage, like an iceberg. It goes for about 6 kilometres underground. And it's a sacred site for the Aboriginal, the original caretakers, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So you don't have all the, you know, the Wi-Fi, the dirty electricity. You're just out in the desert. The energy out there is amazing, and people go through profound healings just by being in the energy of this place. And if you think about it as being a huge conductor of electromagnetic energy, it's really like a library that holds all the information of the entire planet since it's been here. So to be in that energy is very, very healing. And, you know, then we have this collection of very awakened people that are on a genuine path of growth and healing, and they all come together. So you can imagine the dynamics of that. So people have profound healing experiences out there, and they get all of their, you know, their own personal power issues can often come up to the surface, and is a golden opportunity to heal. So I've just realized my phone is ringing. I hope it's not interfering. So that's our conference, and it's really all about stepping into your soul, you know, your soul purpose, being the divine being, and recognizing it, and helping people move into a higher consciousness, into, you know, the fifth dimension, or just stepping into a golden consciousness, you know, heaven on earth. So yeah, it's an amazing place. If you've never been to Australia, but it's on the bucket list, then this is the ideal excuse to come over and come to this beautiful location. It's amazing.
Oh, wow. I'm going to look into that for sure.
Oh, it'd be great.
I would love that. Well, thank you again, Catherine, and for your time and your energy and your friendship. And thank you for sharing so much with us today.
Oh,
And,
you're welcome.
yeah. And so we'll say ta-ta for now, or how do we say that in Australia? How do you say goodbye?
Oh, just good old see ya.
Very good. Well, then we will see you soon. And thank you again.
You're welcome. See you, Karen.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Rasandalo